Alright, this is John Cola with okraw.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you guys 10 foods that I eat that actually are not raw. And I'll explain why they're not raw and why I actually eat them. Now, the first thing I want to say, and I want to let you guys know, is that I encourage everybody to eat a plant-based, fruit and vegetable-dominated, whole food-based diet. So what does this mean? This means I want people to eat as many fresh fruits and fresh vegetables as they possibly can, especially the vegetables. Don't neglect, especially the leafy green vegetables. I believe these should be like the base of your pyramid in any diet, right? That being said, there will be many other things in a diet, in my opinion, to make it more complete so that you're going to get all the different nutrients you need. I know some people might argue with me, John, I could get all the nutrients I need from fruit. Well, hey, good luck to you. I haven't seen too many people. I know like one guy that actually grows his own food. He grows many varieties on 10 acres. He's the only almost pure fruitarian. He really hates vegetables. He eats like mostly all fruit, rock dust enhanced, picked at its peak ripeness. And, you know, he's pretty healthy. But people living on a standard, you know, store-bought, picked too early, organic or conventional fruit-based diet, I don't think could be too good. And that's why I like to add a lot of different things into my diet. And in this episode, I'll be kind of getting into some of the things that I eat that may be considered raw by some, but based on my further research, it's not really raw. But it doesn't really bother me so much anymore. I mean, when I started in the beginning of my raw foods journey, now 22 years ago, I was really like, it's got to be raw, because I had in my mind that like if it's raw, it automatically meant it's healthy. And since that time, you know, 22 years ago, coming to today, I know that's totally not true, especially with the advent of all these new raw processed ingredients. Raw agave, for example, right? I don't care if agave syrup is raw or not. In my opinion, it's still not healthy. And it should not be a food that you consume on any regular kind of basis. Actually, I don't have any agave in my home. If I go out and it's in an ingredient, you know, in a raw food restaurant or in something that I eat on rare occasion, I might eat it. But in general, I try to stay away from foods that are empty calories like agave. And there are so many other different raw food products out there that are labeled raw, but in my opinion are still not healthy because they're actually quite processed. One of those is actually kelp noodles, because they basically just, they're like a 0-calorie food, which is good for some people because you're eating something, but in my opinion it's bad because it's not coming along with all the different nutrients that seaweed could have. So I want to encourage you guys, once again, eat the majority of fruits and vegetables and add some other foods in smaller amounts, right? For fun, for pleasure, for enjoyment, and also, like I do, for nutrition. So the first food that I eat that isn't raw, that may surprise you guys, are nuts and seeds, right? If you guys are buying nuts and seeds from the bulk bins or just off the shelf at most grocery stores or even health food stores, chances are many of them may not be entirely raw. Of course, some of them will be, but some of them may not be. So I have a whole bunch of different nuts and seeds here. I'll explain which ones I believe to be raw and which ones are not. And does it bother me that some of these nuts and seeds are not raw? That doesn't really bother me so much these days. You know, I want it to be as minimally processed as possible, meaning I want it to have the lowest temperature required to preserve that nut without getting too hot where the fats could go rancid. You know, there are some benefits to heating some nuts, or actually one of the nuts that I eat that you'll learn about in just a little bit. But anyways, on to the show here. So the first nut, one of my favorites, is right here. This is the macadamia nut. I normally get macadamia nuts from Hawaii, and for those of you guys that are wondering where I get all these things, I'll post links down below this video so you guys could source some of these same ingredients that I get. Anyways, the macadamia nuts I normally get are actually dehydrated at low temperature, which I believe to be raw, although they don't disclose the temperature. But they taste the freshest, and they taste like they're literally just out of the shell. Those were out of stock this time, so I actually got a replacement one. And these ones, I believe, were probably heat processed too much because they're a little bit too crunchy and a lot of the flavor is not there. But you know, these are still not roasted nuts. These are raw nuts, but just heat processed hotter than what a raw foodist would like, 118 degrees. Next over here we got some pistachios. So these pistachios I bought directly from the farmer at the Heirloom Expo. They're organic, naturally opened without additional heat. So these ones would be considered raw. Next we have these guys over here. And what these guys are, these are sprouted watermelon seeds. These are actually quite good, and these are sprouted, so these can be considered a live food, even better than raw, according to Kailash in my last episode. And if you haven't seen that episode, I'll post a link down below, so be sure to check that one out. Alright, next we got the flax seeds. So flax seeds, you know, unless you're getting them roasted or something, which is weird, you know, they should be raw. So I got a mixture of the golden and the brown. I personally like to eat the golden more than the brown. These ones will actually sprout, germinate, and grow. So these ones are totally raw. And how I like to use these, generally I like to add them to my soups or smoothies, maybe like a tablespoon. Generally I like to turn them into powder first, leave the powder in my fridge, and just add like a tablespoon or two into different smoothies, soups, and dressing recipes that I make in the evening for extra added omega-3s. I think that's very important, very critical, and based on my blood work, my omega-3 to 6 pounds was not where I would like it to be, and so I started including more omega-3 fatty acid foods like the flax seeds. Alright, then the final seed I like to use sometimes are sesame seeds. So I'm like really cheap, right? You could go buy tahini, because basically the main reason I use sesame seeds is when I make my miso lemon tahini salad dressing. And I've had videos on this in the past. It's basically just, I like to use a coconut water, tahini, miso, and some garlic, right? Instead of buying tahini, which, you know, once again, when they're making a nut butter, they're processing it probably at high speed. It's probably getting too hot. So I like to actually just buy the sesame seeds, which are also less expensive, and then just throw those in the blender with the coconut water. It all gets blended up and turns into my nice dressing anyways. Now, here's the thing. I get the hulled sesame seeds. The unhulled are probably, in some ways, some respects, healthier for you because there's more kind of fiber on there. But they also kind of taste bitter and not so good, and they don't make my dressing taste good. So I get the hulled ones. So these ones probably, you know, although these are mechanically hulled, they may not be totally raw, and they will not germinate because they are dehulled. So once again, my diet does not have sesame seeds or any of these other nuts. I might have a handful or two of nuts and seeds a day, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, having some of these heat processed a little bit too high, right? Yeah, okay, so that's one factor in a food, is how hot was a food processed at, but there's many other factors. What kind of other, you know, phytonutrients, phytochemicals, vitamins and minerals, sterols and stanols, and fiber are actually in the food, which there's still plenty of different nutrients in the food. Next we go on to these guys. These are actually wild jungle peanuts, and these are raw. I've actually soaked these and sprouted these, so I know they're raw. Plus, you could actually buy these guys and plant them in the garden, and actually they'll grow. And so these are actually from the Raw Food World, who specializes in raw foods. And so I trust that these are raw because I have sprouted them. I like to eat these sometimes, and these don't have the aflatoxin mold issue like standard peanuts can. Next we got these guys. These are organic raw peely nuts. I believe these to be raw. They actually have the skin on them. And these are actually a really nice high-fat nut, even higher in fat than macadamia nuts. You know, so if you miss eating oil, because I don't eat oil on any kind of regular basis, the peely nuts are like highest oil content I know, and it's really almost kind of oily when you eat it. Next nut we got is the cashews. So, sorry to burst your guys' bubble, but if you guys are buying cashews from the bulk bins, it says raw cashews in the bulk bins at Whole Foods or your health food store or wherever, or even a package at Trader Joe's. Sorry, those raw cashews have actually been heat processed and technically are not raw. Does that mean they're worthless? I wouldn't say that necessarily, but I would say there are better options. So like these ones are actually the organic raw cashews from the Raw Food World, and these are the really raw cashews, and how you could know is that these will be a lot more whiter, and they kind of have like you know, not quite as a brilliant look because they haven't been heat processed. Also, when you taste them, they have a more bland flavor, right? The raw cashews that are not really raw, that have been heat processed hotter than 118, they just haven't been roasted, kind of have a more complex and fattier flavor. This has a more like mellow flavor. That being said, you know, I'm not of the opinion that cashews are like a really one of the best nuts to eat, and I think that far too many raw foodists eat cashews way too often, and you should rotate many other different kinds of nuts. You know, I prefer to use macadamia nuts actually over cashews. But in addition to these, you know, I usually have pecans and walnuts and pine nuts, other kinds of nuts laying around. I try to always, you know, get a different kind of nut or seed in me, because every different nut or seed has a whole variety of phytonutrients and phytochemicals. So up to this point, pretty much all these are pretty much raw, except they may have been heat processed hotter than what I'd like, but I don't really find that a problem. Now the one exception is these guys, and I just learned about these guys actually last March. And this is actually called the baru nut, native to the Brazilian savanna. And these nuts, unlike any of the others, these ones are totally not raw. Let me show you guys what these look like. They kind of look like that there. And these are baru nuts, and they smell amazing. And actually the baru nuts, I found these at the trade show, the Natural Products Expo West trade show, and there's a guy that was selling these there, and I talked to him a pretty long while about these guys, and these guys are, you know, vegan, gluten-free, non-GMO, carbon neutral, and they're fair trade, packed with protein, nutrient-rich superfood, but it says on here, deliciously roasted. John, wait a second, man, you're a raw foodist. How can you be eating roasted baru nuts? All right? So, as I said, all the other nuts I eat are raw, not roasted. This is the only one that I eat that is roasted, and once again, I don't even eat this every day. You know, at the trade show, I tried a sample of a few nuts. I enjoyed the flavor, the taste, and then actually when I looked at some of the different nutritional profiles, comparing even the roasted baru nuts to some of the raw nuts over on this side, you know, some of the nutrients in the baru nut blew it away. For example, the antioxidant content in the baru nut was significantly higher than all the other nuts. In addition, this nut was actually lower in fat than all the other nuts. So this is important for people that want to eat a lower fat diet. The other thing that's interesting about the baru nut is actually it's not a nut at all. It's actually a legume. So it's in the legume family of plants, and so it's more similar to a peanut actually than a real nut. And so it actually has some trypsin inhibitors in the seed itself, and that's why they need to roast it to kind of deactivate those, because otherwise you couldn't really eat these guys raw. So this is really like eating beans, right? And so the nutritional, oh, and also high in zinc too, and I find a lot of people that are vegan, raw vegans even, could be low in zinc, and this is actually a high zinc food compared to most other nuts out there. Plus, the other thing is, I really like the taste. And if you haven't had them before, you guys got to try these. I mean, to me, it tastes like a combination of like a peanut and maybe a cashew. They're totally incredible. One of my favorite ways to eat them is actually eat them with dates. Dates with these guys are totally amazing. But yeah, so I eat these specifically because I like the flavor, like the taste, and also the high antioxidant and nutritional profile, you know, that I may not get from other nuts, plus also the lower fat content. And once again, I don't eat these all the time. I like to snack on these every once in a while, right? And so you might be thinking, John, you're not raw anymore, man. You wouldn't cook stuff. Well, you know, still the majority, 99% of my diet of what I eat is all raw. I have like, you know, a handful of these once every, you know, week or two or whatever, and that's pretty much it. So I want to get you guys out of the thinking of you're either all raw or you're all cooked. You're all good or you're all bad, right? Maybe when I started, I was like kind of into that 100% raw thing. But now, after 22 years, knowing what I know now, like being all raw is not all that it's cracked up to be. I'm not going to say like you should just eat cooked foods, and like many YouTubers out there who used to eat raw and now they're just eating McDonald's and just crap, you know. I don't agree with that either, right? I think there can be a nice balance, and I would encourage everybody to eat a good percentage or most of their diet from raw foods, actually. And, you know, if you want to fill in with some neat, interesting, good-tasting, highly nutritious, you know, cooked foods, hey, go for it, right? They're not the end of the world. And once again, when I eat this, I eat it with other raw foods. I'm not just snacking on these nuts generally, you know, plain by themselves. So I'm always having this nut, the roasted nut, with other raw things. And so I just want to encourage you guys to eat the most raw you can. Of course, that being said, I don't generally recommend eating fried foods, foods heated at high temperature for a long period of time, because they can create toxins within the food. And especially, I do not advocate the use of high temperature cooked meats, which could be bad not only because of the carcinogens created in the cooking process, but also just some of the carcinogens in the animal products themselves. So yeah, on with the show. So these are the nuts. The next thing I want to get into are my spices that I use that may not be considered raw either. So the second food classification that I eat that may not be raw, and probably aren't raw in many instances, are spices and herbs to flavor my food. I even eat these spices and herbs in even lower quantities than the nuts and seeds, right? I might eat a handful or two of nuts and seeds a day, but on these spices, I've even add a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon, depending on what it is, to some of the different foods or recipes that I'm creating in my kitchen. Now, the reason why I like the herbs and spices is because they add a nice flavor profile to the food you're making, right? So you could have stuff tasting like you're eating tacos because you got the taco seasoning in there, or you could use a pizza seasoning or Italian seasoning to make it taste like pasta, right? Or you could have like a curry seasoning to make it taste like curry. I got one here, it's actually a poultry seasoning, kind of make it taste like poultry even though it's 100% chopped vegetables in there. I do have a really good episode, if I remember, I'll put a link down below to a video I did on herbs and actually where I get my herbs from for the lowest prices. But I use a lot of different herbs, and this is just a sampling of some of them. I'll go over them real quick. This is the Korajite cinnamon here. This is the Bragg's Sprinkle 24 Herbs and Spices seasoning. Here we just got the standard black pepper in a grinder. I like to buy the whole peppercorns, and generally, I got black in here now, but generally I like to have the rainbow mix because then you have a wider spectrum of nutrients and actually different kinds and varieties of peppercorns. Next we got the poultry seasoning. Next we got some curry powder. Next here we got some organic no salt seasoning from Costco. And then finally here we got a curry powder. Now the thing I do recommend you guys do is when you buy spices and herbs, always try to get, if you can, the organic ones, right? The organic ones will ensure that your spices and herbs are non-irradiated. This is very important. I don't want my food irradiated. I've seen testimonies of people feeding, irradiated dog food, and, watch out for dog treats and things like that. That's a lot of the crappy meats and whatnot, and they irradiate it to make it safe or kill the bacteria, which actually does something to the food, and then dogs have eaten that and have gotten really sick and whatnot. So if you get organic, you're not going to get the irradiated food, but that being said, it's probably not going to be dehydrated or, processed at below 118 degrees. They're probably doing it at a hotter temperature. And the thing I've learned about the temperature lately is, although, you got to do it under 118 degrees to keep the enzymes are only one component of a whole food component. There's enzymes, and in a whole food there'd be like water and fiber and phytonutrients, phytochemicals, vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, and all these other things that come along with the food. And when you dehydrate things at a low temperature, you may be keeping the enzymes, but if you got to dehydrate at a low temperature for a longer period of time, you're actually losing some of the more important phytonutrients and phytochemicals and antioxidants. So for that case, I'd actually prefer my spices to be dried at a hotter temperature for a shorter period of time, because some of the spices, including, the mints and oreganos and basils and curry and the cloves, they're very high antioxidant foods, right? And I want to try to use these foods to not only make my things taste good, but also for some of the health benefits. The cinnamon has been shown to help with blood pressure regulation and all these different things, right? And it makes my food taste good. So that's the reason why I use some spices that are actually probably not 100% raw like I like them. So some of the next foods that I eat that may not be raw, but might be raw, but it doesn't matter so much for me anymore. It's like I gotta take these green powders, I gotta be raw, and other powdered superfoods. I like to take acai powder, makai powder, camu berry powder, all these different powders, and unfortunately, when they're drying and processing these ingredients, they're not necessarily growing it and doing it for raw foodists. They're doing it for a buck. And in industry, generally, the temperatures they use to dry the product is hotter than what a raw foodist would like. One of the ways around this is if you could look for some of the more expensive freeze-dried products, those ones generally, have been processed at low temperatures to basically maximize the phytonutrients and some of the nutrition in the product that's processed. They also have new processing technologies that also, are at lower temperature that maximize the nutrients. But for the majority of the ones that you're just buying at the store, in my opinion, and based on my research, they will be processed at a hotter temperature. Now, just because they're processed at a hotter temperature, does that mean they're no good anymore because they processed it at 140 degrees instead of 118? In my opinion, absolutely not. There's still plenty of good phytonutrients and phytochemicals and other things, such as the minerals, that are quite valuable and quite good still to take for you. So here I have a sampling of some of the different powders, green powders that I take. Here we have the Star West Botanicals Barley Grass Powder Organic, and this one's probably not considered raw, but hey, if the barley grass powder allows me to get a food that I don't normally grow in my garden in me, and some people swear by their barley grass juice powder or barley grass powder, hey, I think that's a good thing, and I will get some nutrients out of it. Next, here we got some organic broken cell wall chlorella powder. This is probably not low temperature dried like I like, but nonetheless, chlorella powder still has some beneficial nutrients in there. This one's actually the organic wheatgrass powder, super important, and I'd rather have some heat processed, a little bit hotter than raw standard powder in me than not. Next, another one I like, the matcha tea powder, right? Matcha tea powder is basically just dried and ground up tea leaves. I don't know what temperature they're doing that, but nonetheless, they are still quite beneficial for you to take, even if they're not totally raw, right? So I want you guys to get out of this whole, it's got to be raw mindset, right? Maybe don't be as strict, right? Of course, all the green powders, when I put this into a smoothie, I generally use some frozen bananas, fresh bananas, maybe some greens out of my garden, maybe some coconut water, which are actually raw, to add some of these ingredients too. So I'm eating raw foods with, once again, I'm not like adding tons of these powders to my smoothie. I might have a total of all these combined, maybe a cup or so of the powder. This is Calamith blue-green algae here. Next, I got the spirulina mana and the Vitamineral green. So if you guys want one company to trust that would probably be raw compared to not, it'd be this brand. It'd be the Health Force Nutritionals. So that's started by a raw vegan originally, and I trust their quality and processing of the ingredients to ensure you're going to get the most nutrition. In addition, they add probiotics and enzymes into the formulations as well. So even if it is heat processed, you're losing the enzymes, they're adding enzymes back in there, so it's in there. And then here we got some alfalfa powder. We feed it to horses. I think we should also eat alfalfa, whether that's alfalfa sprouts or, this is just ground up alfalfa greens that I like to add to my smoothies. And then finally I got this one right here. This is the Naturally Noble, and this is actually the glucose tolerance factor powdered greens. And this one I specifically take for the special mineral content in there. There's probably like chromium, vanadium, maybe some zinc, and other minerals in there. So even if it is heat processed hotter than what I'd like, there's still active minerals that are actually quite good. In the same company, Naturally Noble makes, other platinum and ruthenium, supplements, which is basically just powdered lettuce for the trace minerals that may be deficient in our diet. And this is why I like to eat a variety of foods, and even if they're not totally raw, I still know that I'm getting some beneficial nutrients out of them. So the fourth food that I eat that is probably not raw, and I don't really care because it's so nutritious for you, and as a raw foodist, you may be neglecting certain whole categories of foods that are actually quite healthy, but because you're a raw foodist in your dogma or the belief system that you have, you're just, I'm not going to eat those because you got to eat them cooked, right? And what that is the mushrooms. So there are certain mushrooms that can't be eaten raw, and I'm not talking about button mushrooms or portobellos that most people on a raw foods diet may eat raw. You actually shouldn't eat those raw, although people do. It's not the best for you. I occasionally, or actually rarely, Sometimes eat shiitake mushrooms, which is one of the ones that is better to eat raw. But nonetheless, there are things in the mushrooms like the chitin that can't be broken down unless it's heat processed. Also, agaritin and other toxins in the mushrooms that need to be heat processed in order to basically negate the effects of some of the toxins in the mushrooms. And as much as there's these toxins in the mushrooms, there's also many beneficial things and components and nutrients in the mushrooms as well. And if you're not eating mushrooms, you're not going to get these. So for many years on my raw foods diet, I really just excluded mushrooms in a pretty big way. But just within the last few years, I started including them in a big way based on some of the new and emerging research about the benefits of mushrooms that can halt cancer in its tracks, and it gives you further, immune system enhancement. And so while I don't buy mushrooms, cook them and stuff, and then eat them, added to my meals, what I like to do instead is just make life real simple for me. So what I like to do is I like to buy some mushroom powder. So I have 3 mushroom powders over here, and I mix all these 3 into one jar that I have here. And this jar is a mixture of mushroom powders that has, I don't know, probably over 20 different kinds of mushrooms to provide me some of the benefits from the mushrooms. And what kind's the best mushroom, John? Well, each kind of mushroom is a bit different. It's better or worse for certain diseases and situations, and they have different phytochemicals and phytonutrients and all these things. So what I get is actually the base of my mixture is this guy right here. This is actually the best price, lowest cost. This is a Mushroom Harvest 14 mushroom blend powder. This is USDA organic, and this is a 1 pound, so it has 14 different kinds of mushrooms mixed in this blend, and these are all been heat processed, dried, and then ground into a powder. So now all I need to do is just take this powder and sprinkle it into my soup or my salad dressing recipe or whatever I'm blending up. Maybe it's my blended salad for the evening. Dump in a bunch of this stuff. I don't really measure. Is it 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, John? Whatever I dump out, man. It could be 2, 3 tablespoons, sometimes 1. I don't really count, but it makes my food taste good. Plus, I got the benefits of the mushroom. So, aside from the 14 mushroom, I also get this guy. This is a new addition. This is known as a Super Shrooms, and this is a mighty blend of 20 organic mushrooms. Once again, these have been properly heat processed and then dried so that you don't have to heat process it yourself. So that makes it easy for me. That goes in my mixture here as well. And this is the Boku Super Shrooms Mighty Blend of 20 organic mushrooms. So yeah, both these guys, are organic. And I would encourage you guys to buy organic mushrooms whenever possible. And the final mushroom product I put in, this is actually also organic. And this mushroom powder is a specific mushroom powder, right? This mushroom powder is by Vegemin's High Vitamin D mushroom powder. So this one I put in specifically for the high vitamin D content, right? You guys could argue all day, John, I take a vegan vitamin D supplement, and it could be totally a man-made supplement, or you could take it from, a non-vegan source, from the lanolin or sheep's wool. Instead of those things, which we wouldn't eat sheep's wool and we wouldn't have these natural synthetic vitamins to get vitamin D. Vitamin D is actually best got from the sun. I'm out in my garden a lot. I do travel a lot, go to many tropical places, even in the wintertime, get lots of sun. But to ensure that I'm getting proper levels of vitamin D, I think one of the best ways to do that is buy a light box. And if you don't do that, then get it from some food, like some mushrooms that are high vitamin D mushrooms. So I add these high vitamin D mushrooms once again in my blend, and it just gets shaken in to my food. So not only am I getting all these different mushrooms, I'm getting vitamin D along with my mushrooms at the same time. One of the best ways, in my opinion, aside from getting it from the sun and in a fully vegan way that's minimally processed, in my opinion. So, the summary here is don't exclude the mushrooms from your diet just because you're a raw foodist. I found a way to simply add it in to my diet so I can get and derive the benefits. Of course, some of these mushroom powders can get a bit spendy. I'm not going to lie. This one's actually the most affordable, so if you can only get one, get this one for sure. But that being said, if you're not adverse to it, buy mushrooms and always buy different kinds and cook them up and then process them and eat them and add them to your salads and things. I think that's definitely a good and wise addition to a raw foods diet. I just like to take the powders. They're a lot easier. So the fifth food that I eat that is probably not raw, and I don't really care so much, is nutritional yeast. Now this is super important, right? I don't get a standard nutritional yeast at the bulk bin at your local health food store. Far too few health food stores actually have the good quality nutritional yeast that I recommend. I recommend getting an organic nutritional yeast, and more importantly, an unfortified nutritional yeast. Many nutritional yeasts may be grown on GMO sugar beets, although based on testing of the nutritional yeast, they don't find any GMO contaminants in there. But nonetheless, they probably have been grown on GMO sugar beets, plus they fortify them with additional nutrients to make it more nutritious, like vitamin B12, some of the other B vitamins, and to many people's detriment, folic acid, and if you're eating leafy greens, you don't need to have additional folic acid, which you're getting folate from the leafy greens, which is actually a far better source instead of a man-made alternative that could be challenging. So what I get instead is I get this organic, unfortified nutritional yeast from Germany. Actually, I get it on Amazon. It's actually called From the Fields Organic Nutritional Yeast. You could buy it in a small package, but you're getting ripped off if you guys do that. I buy it in a 7-pound box, so it might be good to go in with some friends and split it up. But basically, I get a 7-pound box, and actually I use this all the time, almost every night. Maybe some nights I skip or whatever, with nutritional yeast, because this adds nice cheesy flavor to my food, but also adds a wealth of beneficial nutrients to my food as well. So many different amino acids, and certain amino acids that may be deficient in a plant-based diet. For example, lysine. Some people say lysine may be deficient in a plant-based diet, and the nutrition yeast is a supposedly high source of lysine. For those of you guys that want to make sure you get the lysine. Also, there have been studies that show that the nutrition yeast may help boost your immune system, maybe antibacterial and antiviral as well. Plus, actually, I just like the flavor of this stuff. Actually, in this mixture here, I add mostly the organic From the Fields nutrition yeast, and add a small amount of the brewer's yeast, which actually kind of tastes more bitter and nasty, in there to kind of round me out to, once again, get a wider spectrum of different nutrients in my food that I'm eating. Number 6 food that I'm eating that may not necessarily be considered raw because it's dried hotter than what I would like are the seaweeds, right? Seaweeds are very important and essential part of my diet, and aside from the garden fresh grown produce that I grow in my backyard, where I actually supplement with different kind of rock dust and trace minerals and ocean solids to have some of the trace minerals in there, and some of the other foods I eat for the trace minerals. The seaweeds are probably one of my main sources of the trace minerals, including iodine, which may also be deficient in plant-based diets. And so I try to get, a lot of different seaweeds in me. Some of these may be processed hotter than what I would like. And once again, I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I'm not eating the seaweed for their enzymes or whatever. Specifically, I'm eating for their other nutrients. And once again, I'm not eating meals of seaweed. I'm eating like a meal of salad, vegetables, with a tablespoon or so of seaweed powders, or maybe, a cup of expanded seaweed in there for the additional nutrients. Plus, actually, I like the flavor of some of the seaweeds. So over on this side, we got the whole leaf dulse from Maine Coast. Always better if you buy it in bulk. This is the big bulk pack. And I believe this is actually sun-dried, so this could be considered raw. But just because it's not sun-dried, provided it's not roasted, I still believe it is actually quite healthy. So even this stuff here, this is the certified organic raw nori. It's my personal opinion that any nori you buy has been processed at hotter than 118 degrees, what it should be, even if it's certified organic. And it says raw on there, right? I think raw just means not roasted. And the tip for nori anyways is when you're buying nori, you want to try to look for the nori that actually is the purplish colored sheets, because nori in the ocean, I have some actually in this pack here, is actually a purple, and it shouldn't be green. If it's green, it's been roasted, and if it's black, it's kind of like in the middle. So I like to get the purple nori whenever I can. And in addition, I got all these different kinds of seaweeds, like from a nice Japanese store locally. We could get like a mixed seaweed salad mixture with, I don't know, like 4 different kinds of seaweed in there. So I like these a lot. You can of course just get the standard single kind. I think this is like, this just says seaweed. I think this is like maybe wakame. Or, you know, if you want to be totally purist, right, go down to the sea in a safe place and harvest your own seaweed. If I remember, I'll put a link down below to the video I made where I harvest my own seaweed off the northern California coast. And actually that's all in this bag here that I dehydrated at low temperature. So all this could be considered raw here. Now aside from the raw whole seaweed, which frankly would probably be a better way to buy your seaweed because it's been processed less, and generally the whole seaweed generally is probably more raw than not, except if you're getting imported seaweeds in packages, then it's probably hotter than, hotter than 118 degrees. I encourage you guys to support local seaweed harvesters, you know, whether they're in, you know, Maine or Vermont or along the East Coast there or the West Coast, right? A lot of the small mom and pop shop guys are basically just sun drying the seaweeds for most part. But aside from that, I also get seaweed powders. And here's just a sampling of them. I get a lot of different kinds. And what I do is I take all the different powders, at least maybe 10 different kinds of powders, and I mix them all up in one big bowl. And then they go in my special Miron glass jar that I basically open up. Once again, when I'm making salads or soups or blended salads, I'll just sprinkle some of the mixture in here in my, you know, soup or recipe. So now I'm getting a blend of like 10 different seaweeds. So along with like over 20 different kinds of mushrooms, I'm getting like over 10 different kinds of seaweeds. I mean, this one has to be rockweed powder. This one actually is sea lettuce powder. This one's actually IKB powder. Basically, it's 3 different kinds of seaweed. I get another seaweed powder from another company. It's like 6 different kinds. And I get a red seaweed, Gigantina seaweed, just mixed all up. You know, the seaweeds have special polysaccharides and other nutrients in there that can be quite beneficial for immune system, strengthening. And so every different food on the planet has some different kind of benefits. And, you know, I think people, especially in raw foods, plant-based vegan diets, or even just standard American diets, they should really be including a lot more seaweeds, even if they're not considered raw. So the 7th food that I like to include sometimes in my diet, maybe a couple times a week, include the next food that I'll be talking about. And these foods, while they cannot be considered raw, because actually they use cooked beans to manufacture these products, they actually ferment the cooked beans and then they turn into a live food. So they're enzymatically rich and have special properties to these foods, and that's why I include them in my diet. So what these foods are, these are basically fermented bean-based products, although one of them could be maybe grains and other things. They don't necessarily need to be beans. And what they are number 1, the miso. So this one happens to be a chickpea miso. I also do get some soy-based misos. And when I do get the misos, I try to find the ones that are actually the low-sodium misos, which actually could be low-sodium miso, sometimes half as much sodium as the standard miso. So I encourage you guys to look for those. And also, very important, get organic soy misos. Another thing super important because they are GMOing soy. And, I eat this because of the fermented food, right? Once again, it adds a unique flavor to my foods. It allows me to eat a food that I wouldn't necessarily normally eat in my diet, whether it's chickpeas or soybeans in the form of the miso. It also adds a little bit of salt to my food, but much lower quantities. And I'm not eating this for the salty flavor, but for the beans that are contained in there, and then kind of like a byproduct of the fermentation, and when they make it is the salt, so that kind of adds a nice flavor too. It adds a nice umami flavor to my food as well. And there's many benefits to some of the fermented bean products. You know, another one I like a lot is the Megumi Natto. I've also made my own natto before, but I like the Megumi Natto. I could get it locally here. This is an unpasteurized, unheat processed, unfrozen natto. Unfortunately, most nattos you might buy at a Japanese store have been frozen. I can't read Japanese. They may also be GMO, but I like the organic Megumi Natto made in Sebastopol, California, and may be available near you in some places. And I do think they also do ship this stuff if you order online. But I like the natto because, they basically just take 100% soybeans, no salt, no nothing added. They cook the soybeans, they add the bacteria to it, and then they basically let it culture, and then it makes the natto. And some people may love natto or hate it. It's kind of like durin. You love it or hate it. You think it's stinky or you think it smells amazing. Same thing with the natto. You could open it up and you think it smells like barf or gross. And you could eat it. You think it tastes totally nasty. Or you could open it and it smells amazing and you taste it and it tastes amazing. I am of the later, person. I think it smells amazing, tastes amazing, and it's quite good. And I could eat it plain. And I not only eat this for getting, number one, the soy in me, because, once again, soy on a raw foods diet is probably pretty much non-eaten. I've tried to eat soy sprouts before, made me really sick. I don't necessarily recommend that. But, when we exclude foods on whatever diet you're on, you're limiting the amount of phytonutrients and phytochemicals you could be getting. For example, in soy, there's isoflavones, which are actually anti-cancer and can protect us from different estrogens, right? Basically, synthetic estrogens like BPA and plasticizers, right? The soy foods can help us with that, along with things like the flax, right? Super important to get some of these into you for their protective qualities, and if you don't eat these foods, you're not going to get it. Plus, the other reason why I like the natto, kind of twofold. Number one is the nattokinase. Nattokinase is basically an enzyme, super high, and actually you just buy nattokinase supplement at the health food store. Basically, people take that to help clean out their arteries of excess crud and junk, right? But in the natto, because it's a live food, hasn't been heat processed, after it's been cultured, hasn't been frozen, you got all the nattokinase in there that you're going to get. And then plus another ingredient that is actually very rare to get in a vegan diet is the vitamin K2. Some people may argue, John, we could convert K1 to K2. Hey, if you're doing that, that's great. I don't want to just, put all my eggs in one basket and say, hey, I'm converting K1 into K2. I want to eat K2 to make sure I have it, because K2 is very important in bone health. Right? If you don't have enough K2, even if you're getting calcium, vitamin D, and all the other cofactors, you're not going to have good bone health, because you also need that K2 to make that whole system work. So I get that from my natto. I like to eat that, once, twice a week, generally. I'll have the miso maybe, a few times more than that. And once again, these are both live products. The next product I get is this guy, and these are actually quite hard to find. This is actually tempeh. So this is not the tempeh you're going to buy at your local health food store. Tempeh from your local health food store that's in the refrigerated section, unless you live on Maui at present time, and maybe a few other places in the country, have been actually heat processed, pasteurized. So when you pasteurize the tempeh, you lose some of the benefits of the tempeh, right? And the reason why I like the tempeh, and this one happens to be the Alive and Healing tempeh from Windsor, California, aliveandhealing.com. This can be ordered online. This one actually I picked up local in the Santa Rosa area. This is the bulk pack. It comes in a lot larger size that they'll ship to you, actually. It's like a 1 pound package, and the one that you normally buy is like 8 ounces. And so they have basically very simple ingredients in here. It's basically just soybeans, rice vinegar, tempeh culture, and organic tapioca starch. I guess some of the other ones I've had in the past don't have the tapioca starch, but it's probably that's in smaller quantities. But anyways, the reason why, once again, I like the tempeh is because, once again, I'm getting the soybeans in me. And, if you just cook soybeans and eat them, that's one thing. They could still be very hard to digest, and cooking the soybeans is actually quite recommended. And actually cooking most beans is quite recommended, because they do have some toxins in there that get broken down by the heat processing. But even more, once they cook the soy, they basically inoculate the tempeh culture, and the tempeh culture go to work and break it down even more and take away some of those, digestive inhibitors, and break down the soy more so we could even digest it even better, right? And once again, this is a high source of protein, so if you think you need to get all your, your calories from fat or carbs, and like carb being sugar, hey, you could get them from beans and grains instead. Some may say that's a better source. I just personally think that, getting a probiotic-rich food, because we are more than vitamins and minerals and carbs and all this stuff. We are microbiome creatures. We actually have more bacteria in us, than human cells, from what they say. And so I like rich probiotic foods, not only probiotic foods that have the probiotics within them, such as these foods, but also eating plenty of fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, that actually the prebiotic foods that these bacteria can live on. So yeah, So I do like this guy. Actually, the better tempeh I liked actually better was the Adzuki bean tempeh. If you live on Maui, they don't currently ship. The Maui Tempeh Company, if I remember, I'll put a link down below to the Maui Tempeh Company video I made over there where they sell it fresh. And actually, fresh is way better. Normally, it's sold in frozen because it just stays fresher longer. And you thaw it out and then you could eat it. But the fresh stuff only lasts maybe like a week until it kind of expires and goes bad because it is a live food product. Also, I think in the Texas, Austin, Texas area, there's a company down there, maybe Texas Tempeh. They make like 4 different kinds of tempeh, so when I would visit my girlfriend down there, we'd always get some raw tempeh that's in a refrigerated section in some of the stores down there in Austin. But yeah, once again, I want to expand the volume of foods that I eat so I'm not missing out on any nutrients that may be beneficial for me. And I believe in this way, by consuming, cultured, live bean products, it's only going to help me because there's so much research on the beans, not only because of their phytonutrients and phytochemicals, but also just the fibers that come along, the resistant fibers that just basically don't get digested and help you build your digestive system to make it even stronger and to slow down the absorption of some of the sugars when you do eat some of those fresh fruits in your diet. So the 8th food I eat that may not necessarily be raw, but once again, it's not a big concern for me personally because this food has some benefits that I desire. It's this guy right here. This is actually called the SugaVida. And for those of you guys that have been watching me for a while, I found this actually at a trade show. I'll post a link down below to the video I found this at the trade show. And basically, this is basically palm sap, and it says. SugaVida is harvested from the blossoms of the palmyra tree. It has a GI of 40, so that's a low GI, is rich in B vitamins, alkalizing, and has a wonderful rich taste. Plus, SugaVida is also the only plant-generated natural source of vitamin B12. So having confirmed that, that's what they're advertising on here. That's what they advertise at all their literature at the trade show, and even since I've seen them, they still are advertising this. So, once again, I'm not taking this for my B12. I still take supplemental B12, B12 patches, just to make sure I'm getting B12 because it is an essential nutrient. But optimally, I would prefer to get my B12 from food. So instead of taking a man-made supplement for B12, I'd rather take this if this actually worked and the B12 was not analogs and it was actually absorbable from the SugaVida. So, for me, eating foods is not only pleasurable because this actually tastes quite good, has a nice flavor, and once again, I like to add, a teaspoon of this or a tablespoon of this in my salad dressings, in my different soups and whatnot to make it a little bit sweet, but also get some B12. So I'm just putting the mushroom powder in there, the seaweed powder for the minerals, getting the vitamin D from the mushroom powder, the vitamin B12 from this stuff potentially. And so, some of my dressings and foods I create taste amazing, but also are nutrition packed. And that's why I eat a lot of my foods. It's not just eating a food just because I want to eat it, but there's some functionality to that food that I believe that I would like to get. I'm only going to get that if I eat that food. And I know there's some of you guys that, hey, you could get all the nutrition you need from fruits and greens, and hey, if that's your opinion, do that in your life, right? And if it's working for you, go for it. In this video, I'm just explaining you guys what I do in case you guys want to, do some of the things I do because you find it, it makes sense to you. And I've learned this after 22 years of seeing people both succeed and fail, and I want to try to do it just a little bit better than everybody else has gone before me and done this previously to try to have even a higher level and better level of health. And so that's why I do all these things, and that's why I'm taking all this time to make this video for you guys as well. So the 9th food that I eat that may not be considered raw either are frozen vegetables. Once again, my diet is not a frozen vegetable diet, right? I'll make a soup specifically, and that's how I usually use these frozen vegetables. I'll make a soup with, juiced bell peppers, blend it up with all the different, powders you guys saw earlier, handful of nuts and seeds, and then I'll chop up fresh vegetables from my garden, romaine lettuce, bits of tomatoes, onions, all this kind of stuff, and then I'll put in like, I don't know, tablespoon or 2 of each of these items just to expand the repertoire of vegetables I'm eating, and also even get some vegetables that I might not normally be eating. So for example, you know, I have organic green peas. Once again, peas are a bean, and I think far too many raw foodists don't eat enough beans. These cannot be considered raw because they are blanched before they freeze them. So if you want to get raw ones, it's not too hard. You got to just go ahead and buy your green peas, shell them or whatever, and then freeze them yourself. You could totally do that. It's not too difficult. Same thing with the corn, right? The corn, you could buy corn, husk it yourself, and then freeze it. You could have raw corn. To me, it's just not worth the time investment to do that. And, you know, the organic green peas and corn, as well as other frozen vegetables, are available at Costco in general for pretty inexpensive. I think it's like maybe $1 per pound, a little bit over that. So it's quite affordable, and it allows me to get more of these vegetables that I might normally be eating. You know, corn has a very small, limited window. Organic corn has lately been quite expensive, like $1 per ear or head or whatever. And so having this makes it really easy. I can have it any time of year. And you know, it's not uncommon to find frozen vegetables being served at many raw food restaurants, actually, when they can't get the fresh produce. So the other one I started including also are these guys. These are Trader Joe's artichoke hearts. And I include the artichoke hearts because artichoke hearts are something that I would eat on a raw foods diet, but very irregularly, right? You could eat artichokes raw just like you eat them cooked. You know, you scrape off the little bottoms of the little petals with your mouth and whatnot, and then you could eat the heart. It's, you know, it's not as good raw than cooked, personally, from what I remember. But you know, they're still good, and you should eat them because actually they're in the thistle family, and they're actually very high in antioxidants. And so that's why I eat the artichoke hearts that are frozen. These are probably already, you know, cut up. Just got the hearts in there. They're blanched and they're frozen. And I basically just put them in my soup. They thaw in the soup, and then I eat them. And I get the nutrients from the artichokes, which are, once again, high antioxidant, that I would not normally get unless I had them in the frozen state. Because de-shucking an artichoke, getting out the heart, all this stuff, it's kind of a pain, right? So I'm glad I could do this and increase, you know, the variety of foods and phytonutrients that I'm getting. So the 10th food that I eat that can't be considered raw either are these guys right here. And what this is actually freeze-dried corn. At some points also I've had freeze-dried peas. And basically to make the freeze-dried corn or peas, generally they actually blanch the corn or peas, then put it in the freeze dryer and freeze-dry it. So technically not really raw. Now if you got your own corn or peas and freeze-dried them yourself in your own freeze dryer, then they, yes, could be considered raw. And actually recently I did get a freeze dryer to start doing that once I get the freeze dryer set up. But once again, you know, this allows me to have different food textures and also increase the varieties I'm having. Plus this is a very easy and convenient travel food. Also, you know, I combine this when I'm eating kale chips to dilute the kale chips. If I'm buying commercial kale chips, or even if I make my own, adds a nice texture. Plus if you miss popcorn on a raw foods diet, which, you know, I would probably say popcorn is probably not one of the worst foods that are whole food, plant-based out there. You know, there are definitely better foods, and I'd rather eat, you know, freeze-dried corn instead of popcorn. But this stuff actually has a nice flavor. It's nice and light, a little bit crunchy even. I make a nice little sauce. I use some DHA algae oil on here, and then I put like some curry powder, some seaweed powder, herbs and spices, shake it all up in a jar, and eat it. It's just totally like eating like popcorn to me. But yeah, once again, you know, I like the freeze-dried corn basically because it adds a new texture. Like, it's a dry texture that's crunchy, and it's different than like buying something that's just like dehydrated, right? That's like a hard texture. This is like totally a new texture. I would encourage you guys to try it if you never have before. It's actually quite good, although this can't be considered raw. But nonetheless, I believe it's still quite nutritious. And of course, freeze-dried corn is probably way better than a candy bar, than a pack of candy, soda, chips, cookies, all these other things that you could buy, because literally it's just 100% corn. And then, I did want to mention too, on the frozen vegetables have been blanched, but in general, frozen fruits are not blanched, and neither are frozen fruits that are freeze-dried, right? Those are not blanched either, so those could be considered raw. So also I get, you know, sometimes freeze-dried durian, freeze-dried mangoes that are available at like Trader Joe's. Freeze-dried durian you got to order online. But those are just for like small quantities, for like for fun and enjoyment, for traveling sometimes. They are quite concentrated and quite sweet. Those are like eating crack for me when I eat the freeze-dried fruits. Totally insane. Freeze-dried durians, totally insane. But anyways, that's pretty much the end of my video today. Basically I just wanted to show you guys some of the things I eat that are not raw and explain to you guys why I eat some non-raw foods, even though I've been a 99.9% raw foodist since 1995, right? It's not so important for me to hold those 100% or 99% ideals so much as in the past. That being said, I still eat 99% raw. There's a few things I make exceptions on that you guys saw in this episode on the foods I eat. And once again, the reason why I do this is to increase the varieties of foods that I'm getting so that, in my opinion, I'll be healthier than without eating them and by excluding them, as many raw foodists do. And once again, this is my path. If you guys are on your own path, do what you guys want. I just want to put this video out there because I know a lot of people are interested in what I do and they may want to do it. And so if you guys want to do it, do it. But hopefully I made some sense to you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please be sure to like it, give me a thumbs up. Also be sure to share this video with somebody else you think it might be helpful for. Also be sure to click that subscribe button right down below so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming episodes that are coming out about every 5 to 7 days. You never know where I'll show up or what you'll be learning on my YouTube channel. Also be sure to check my past episodes. My past episodes are a wealth of knowledge, including some of the episodes that I referenced in this video that I'll put links down below to in the description. So with that, in the end, I want to make one final comment. I want to encourage you guys to eat mostly fruits and vegetables in your diet. And yes, if you got to cook some stuff, all cooked foods are not bad. There's different levels of, some cooked foods are way worse than others. Of course, doing something like steaming, boiling, or pressure cooking, probably some of the best ways to cook your food if you need to. And if that allows you to get more fresh fruits and vegetables in you instead of other highly processed foods, hey, go for it. I think that's definitely what we really need to focus on. And unfortunately, most Americans just simply do not get enough fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, or even lightly cooked, specifically the vegetables, personally. So with that, my name is John Kohler with okraw.com. We'll see you next time. And until then, remember, keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're always the best.